They called me a troublemaker. They called me a rebel. Some even called me a criminal. But I knew one thing: without women's voices, democracy was only half alive. My name is Emmeline Pankhurst, and this is my story. I was born in Manchester in 1858, into a home where politics was always present. From my earliest days, I listened to debates about justice and equality. Men talked about the need for workers' rights, for fair wages, and for an end to poverty. And they did all of this in the shadow of another great injustice. At the time, women could not vote. They couldn't own property in their own name. They couldn't even sit on juries. They were treated as second-class citizens in their own country. As a child, I heard these debates and I absorbed them. When I was 16, I wrote an essay on women as suffrage that won first prize at the Manchester Literary and Debating Society. I knew that women deserved more than silence. They deserved power. But how could we achieve it? Should we beg for our rights or demand them? I was torn. In those days, most people believed that women should be at home raising children, caring for the elderly, and looking after the house. Those who pushed for women's rights argued that women should have the right to work, to earn money, and to spend it. They said women should have access to education and healthcare. But nobody demanded the right to vote. Not yet. My father, Frederick, was against women's suffrage. He believed that women were too emotional to vote. My mother, Anne, supported my brother Harry in his political career, and she didn't want anything to distract him from his goals. So neither of my parents supported me or my sister Sylvia in our fight for women's rights. So when Sylvia told me that she planned to marry a man named Richard, who wasn't very wealthy, I wasn't surprised when my parents forbade her from moving in with him. Sylvia decided to defy our parents, and she moved out of our family home. She and Richard lived in poverty, working-class poverty, and she soon found herself pregnant with their first child. Then she gave birth to another, and then another. 3 children in 3 years. But despite the lack of support, Sylvia carried on working for the cause. In the meantime, I married a man named Richard, too. He was a journalist and suffragist, and we shared a passion for social justice. Together, we had 2 children. By the time our youngest was 3 months old, I was already planning my next move in the fight for women's rights. My older sister, Christabel, had joined the Women's Franchise League. It was the group that lobbied politicians and asked them nicely to consider giving women the right to vote. They had been doing this for decades, but nothing had changed. I wondered if there was another way, a more forceful way. In 1903, I founded the Women's Social and Political Union. Our mission was clear: win votes for women. And we had one motto: deeds, not words. The passive approach hadn't worked, so now we were taking direct action. We organized protests, rallies, and meetings with politicians. We distributed leaflets, wrote letters to newspapers, and spoke to anyone who would listen. But I knew that we needed something more, something to put real fear into the hearts of the men in power. One day, Christabel had an idea. She suggested that we disrupt public meetings held by politicians who opposed women's suffrage. I loved it. It was bold, daring, and it would definitely get their attention. That night, Christabel and I slipped into the town hall after dark and chained ourselves to the railings around the mayor's chair. Then we waited. Sure enough, when the mayor arrived the following morning, he couldn't take his seat because we had locked it. He looked furious, but he had no choice but to go back home. Again and again, we repeated this tactic. We chained ourselves to furniture, flooded rooms with water, cut telegraph wires, and destroyed property. And every time, the authorities were forced to call the police. And when the police arrived, I handed them my card. On it, I had written Mrs. Pankhurst. I signed it. And then I sat down calmly and waited for them to arrest me. I got what I wanted: publicity. Newspapers reported my actions. People talked about me on the street. Soon, people were calling me the Mud Maid because I like getting dirty while distributing leaflets. Others called me a female terrorist. I didn't mind. As long as people talked about me, we were making progress. But as our movement grew, so did the violence. In 1909, a member of the WSPU, or Women's Social and Political Union, shot and injured the Liberal Party leader, David Lloyd George. Another man was injured in the attack. Now, people were calling me a female anarchist. I was worried. I didn't want anyone else to get hurt. And besides, being arrested and going to prison was starting to take its toll on my health. There was always a price to pay for our actions, and this time I ended up paying it. After I had an appendix operation in 1910, I developed peritonitis and nearly died. It was then that I realized I needed to take a step back. Sylvia returned from London and helped me run the organization while Christabel led the protests. By 1912, I was feeling better and it was time to come up with a new plan. This time, we wouldn't just disrupt meetings. We would stand candidates in parliamentary elections. Our candidates might not win, but we would make sure they got enough votes to send a message. And so the first candidates were chosen and they campaigned hard. The papers ran stories about the Pankhurst women, and we became famous throughout Britain. Then World War I broke out and everything changed. Sylvia had lost her voice and become an outspoken critic of the war. But I knew that fighting on the streets would only make people forget about women's suffrage. We needed a new tactic, something to show men how much women had to offer. So I called on all women to participate in the war effort. Thousands answered the call. They volunteered as nurses, delivering supplies, recruiting other volunteers, and serving on the front lines. I helped set up the Women's Land Army, which provided food for the troops. I even enlisted myself and was shocked by what I saw. There were machine guns everywhere and it seemed like there was shooting all day long. I don't think I've ever been so frightened in my life. When I came back from the war, things were different. Everyone, including the king, had seen what women could do. So when my candidates stood in the 1918 election, they won. Women over 30 got the right to vote. It wasn't everything we had hoped for. Black women still couldn't vote. And the right to vote didn't extend to Scotland or Wales. But it was a start. After that, I retired from the fight. I knew that the rest would come in time. History may remember me as defiant, difficult, even dangerous. But I only ever wanted one thing, for women to stand as equals beside men. 10 years later, in 1928, after my death, the law was finally changed. All women over the age of 21 in Britain got the right to vote. The movement had taken decades, but the dream of a better future kept me going. I knew that one day my granddaughters could look back and say that they lived in a world where women as voices were heard. That is my legacy. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, check out our series on influential women throughout history. You can watch it here. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel.